Michelle Kaufman.
And I'm Maddie Goldenstern, and we researched how communication and domestic violence relate.
As part of our project, in addition to the articles, we interviewed Shelby Looper, director of the Muncie Police Department Victim Advocate Program. We also talked to a domestic violence survivor whose abuser controlled her communication and used words as his abuse.
We asked Shelby, who works with the domestic violence cases every day, to define domestic violence. Here's what she had to say.
Do you think people know what domestic violence is?
No, not really. I think people have a general idea. I think they think, it's when a man beats a woman. That's not necessarily true. It's any kind of physical. It's anything verbal, emotional, sexual, just emotional, financial. It's not just a man that beats a woman over and over again. It can be a man that yells at a woman and intimidates her over and over again. People are aware that domestic violence is a thing. I think now it's becoming more and more common for people to discuss it. However, they don't know how serious of an issue it is. They don't know how much it dehumanizes us as a society.
Victim advocates like Shelby are at risk of burnouts or other communication problems. Elizabeth Babin's research found that they could experience communication anxiety, communication competence, and perceived emotional support. These three things can then combine to make a domestic violence advocate become a burnout and not be able to attend to the actual domestic violence victims.
Shelby says gaslighting is another form that abusers can use in domestic violence situations that has communication at the base.
Gaslighting, which is the act of making someone think they're crazy so that way they believe you and they never believe themselves.
A 2003 Forensic of Pi Kappa Delta article says that with gaslighting, someone convinces the other person that the incident just didn't happen, and if the incident is not denied, it can be rewritten with, quote, dramatic and extensive alterations to facts in order to validate his version of the story. Shifting blame can also be another aspect of gaslighting. Within forensics and speech tournaments, the article states that gaslighting tactics in the forensic family can be seen in coaches and debaters' criticism of judges' decisions. Margie Harvey is a survivor of domestic violence. Her ex-boyfriend was recently sentenced to 101 years in prison for sending Harvey a homemade bomb. She told us that when she moved in with him, that's when the controlling started.
I couldn't do this, I couldn't talk to this person, I couldn't eat this way, I couldn't wear my hair this way. And so I left him, and then I think it was like 4 days later I went back, and then a week later I was gone again because nothing changed.
Harvey will soon speak at a class put on by the Muncie Police Department about her experience. Domestic violence and how it affects relationships has been studied before. In 2004, now Ball State CCIM Associate Dean Lori Byers and Professor Carolyn Shu helped with a study on the interplay of violence, relationship quality, commitment, and communication in abusive relationships. The study looked at the association between communicative acts of abuse, relationship quality, and relationship commitment. The article found physically abused women received more communicative acts of abuse and reported lower levels of relationship quality. The researchers assessed abusive messages and relationship quality and asked questions such as, how often does he call you hurtful names? And how stable is your relationship? Research found physically abused women reported double the degree of verbal abuse than non-physically abused women. The study's results indicate that significant negative relationships exist between communicative acts of abuse and relationship quality and commitment.
Researchers found that women who are victims of domestic violence usually seek care in an emergency department. However, it is challenging to hold sensitive conversation in that sort of hectic environment. Because of this, certain women won't reach out and talk in these situations. This is another challenge associated with communication in domestic violence. As a solution, we have research and tips on communication and ways to identify domestic violence.
To help solve the problem of hectic environments in a hospital setting, victims should have a separate room for privacy and quietness so they can get out what they need to say and feel listened to the full extent. This would be helpful to make them more comfortable, and it would also help them to recall details they may have otherwise forgotten, having to recall them in that hectic of an environment.
Another solution is educating people on what domestic violence is so they can realize if they have been a victim and so they know how not to treat other people. Shelby talked about how she doesn't think people really know what domestic violence is, and verbal abuse is also a form of domestic violence.
Tips on how to communicate with someone who has a history of domestic abuse. Stop. Take a deep breath and give yourself time to calm down. Next would be think. Think about the situation and try to figure out the real problem. After that would be talk. Try to explain your feelings as calmly as possible. And finally, listen. Stop talking and just listen to what they have to say. Next, we have some tips for talking with survivors of domestic abuse. Start out by saying, "I believe you, and it took a lot of courage to tell me about this." And then go from there and say things like, "It's not your fault, you didn't do anything to deserve this, you're not alone, and I'm sorry this happened to you, this shouldn't have happened to you."